Today on our Red House Youth Daily Devotional, we are continuing our series on the stewardship of money. Yesterday we talked about stewardship of time, and before that we talked about stewardship of spiritual gifts. And this is all within the series of spiritual disciplines. And we know that spiritual disciplines deal with the things that make us more godly in our lives. And so it's important for us to talk about the stewardship of money because money is one of those things that will follow you for the rest of your life. You'll always have people asking you for help financially, whether that's someone you see on the street in your everyday life, or an institution, organization, the church, or even people going on missions. People will always need help financially, and it's important for us to know what God says on giving financially. Or being a good steward of your money. And the passage that we're going to focus on today is 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6 through 8, which says, "The point is this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times, you may abound in every good work." And I'm going to break this up verse by verse, but I'm going to start at verse 8 and work my way back to 6, because it's important for us to look at verse 8 and see that it re-emphasizes what we've already talked about the last 2 days, where everything that we have is a gift from God, whether that's something physical that we have, like a house, or money that we have, or even just talents that we have, spiritual gifts and talents. Even people in our lives are gifts from God. And so it's important for us to do everything that we can to be good stewards of our relationships that God has given us. But here in verse 8, we see that God gives us everything. He is able to make all grace abound to us. And the reason that Paul brings this up is because this means that we have all sufficiency, which means that we have everything that we need to make good use of what we have. So Paul is saying that God has given you everything, and he has given everything that you need to be an effective steward, an effective person in ministry. And we often think that people in ministry are the people that work at the church, like me, but we are all in ministry. And so because God has given us everything, we are called to make sure that we use everything that we have for good works, for service for Christ and his kingdom. So in verse 7, we see that a person who gives should look at their heart and not necessarily just in what they give or how much they give. The emphasis in verse 7 is on how you give and why you give. So the how would be giving with a cheerful heart. The how would be giving in a way that is not self-uplifting, but in a way that lifts others up and lifts God up. And that's what it looks like in a cheerful giver, is not someone that is being forced to give or is sad that they're giving, but it's actually this happiness that comes from giving because of what God has given you. And this all kind of turns around this idea that everything that we have, especially finances, is a gift from God. And so even though you're working for that money, it's important for us to continually remind ourselves that all of the finances that we have are actually gifts from God and should be used in a way that is uplifting to God. Finally, verse 6, "Whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully." And what Paul is getting at here is this idea that what we put in is what we get out. And he writes this not to make people give so that they get more back, because he is writing with this idea that we emphasize in verse 8, that a person with the correct heart set does not give in order to get. The person with the right heart gives so that they can give more. It's never a mindset or a heart set that says, okay, I'm going to give this and then I'm going to get this back. So when we give, when we are good stewards of our money for Christ and his kingdom, the emphasis is not on anything revolving around what we can get. The emphasis is all on what we can give and how much we can give. And Christ tells us in the New Testament, in the Gospels, that if a person really wants to follow him, they are called to give up everything that they have for him. And this has turned into a lot of people throughout history just getting rid of everything they have. And that might be the road that you're called to go down, but I want to encourage those of you who want to keep a job and have a house and a family and be able to support those people or yourself. When we look at, let's say, imagine a graph, and this is going to be a short illustration and we're done for the day, but imagine a graph where you start off at a value of 100, and then over time, if you continue to work, your wealth accumulates. Now imagine cutting that graph off right at 100, that's all you give to Christ and his kingdom. If you were to continually work and give the same amount every single year, the amount that you contribute to Christ and his kingdom increases over time. And so over time, you're actually giving more than if you were to give everything that you have right now. And this is a little bit tricky to understand, so if you have questions, message me back or write in the comments section and I can show you all the calculations with that. It's actually a really simple calculation. But my challenge for you guys today is to look at what you have and just look at your finances. I know some of you do have jobs and some of you don't. So whatever you make, be sure to set aside at least a part of that to be able to give to either a charity that is Christ-centered, a Christ-centered institution, a church, someone that's going into Christian missions. All of these count as ways to give financially and be good stewards of what you have. So I went a little bit long today. These stewardship lessons are actually packed full of information that I try to give to you guys. So I hope to see you guys tomorrow and have a great Thursday.